Alright, time to read the full patch preview. Taking a bit of a different approach and taking more holistically role by role. Top lane. The top meta is looking pretty varied with a mix of fighters, tanks, AP and any mortar endurers and some range. We're not looking to mix this up too much as a result. Tanks are a little on the weaker side, but Cassante, Udyr, Ornn and Sion should be situational viable. We're not looking to make them a dominating blind. With grab buffs and their spawn timers offset, we're hoping to see a little less trading of objectives and an increased focus and attention on top set. Okay, so I think what they're trying to do is they put grabs now to 6 minute spawn, which means that mid lane and top lane are probably going to be level 6 at that mark. They will be. Which means that the agency of grabs are going to be more about mid and top, the first grabs, than they were before. Okay, so jungle is going to lose some agency here, probably. On top of that, when they're mentioning Cassante, Udyr, Ornn and Sion, realistically speaking, the only tank here that will be played at MSI is probably Cassante. Jungle. With Rel out, tank junglers, most jobs should be less prevalent. Yeah, I mean, Sejuani is probably the only one that gets played, but she's bad. We're looking to get a few more carry junglers back to the mix, and AP junglers are lacking presence, so we're targeting Salas as an exciting flex. And hoping this doesn't come back to bite us. Well, this is not gonna happen. Salas jungle will see no play. If they wanted to have AP junglers, I mean, Diana was a good buff, but they probably should have buffed something like, I don't know, Karthus maybe, or I don't know, I don't even know. This is just not happening. Graves, Jarvan, and Olaf are also targeted to make an appearance, though Olaf is probably the most opportunistic of the bunch. Disagree. Jarvan is by far the most opportunistic, whatever this word is. Graves will probably not see play, depending on how big the buff is, and Olaf will probably also not see the play, because Olaf in competitive especially gets way less resources. Olaf without resources is a useless champion. Mid lane, Azir nerfs are targeted at his ability to get through lane in tougher matchups to open up more champions. The meta is pretty mage heavy, but opening Salas as a flex is aimed at having him more play, and with LeBlanc Akali buffs looking to have more non-mages see play. Yeah, sure, but the Salas buff doesn't really benefit him on mid lane. So if people are not playing Salas ever right now in mid lane, even if LeBlanc and Akali enter meta, I kind of doubt Salas will be the answer to those champions. Galio is a bit under after all his changes, so we're bringing him a bit further up. He's relatively low master champion, and we expect him to be able to live above 50% win rate. Way is at that contagious, but he's a champion that we expect to be balanced around pro. He's not listening. He's not seeing play broadly, so we're giving him a buff. He had a brief stint in popularity, but rapidly declined. He's a unique non-hard carry mage, so should add some additional texture here. See this? Non-hard carry mage. I'm glad they say this, because it is true. He has a lot of utility in his kit, which makes him be a very hard champion to be a hard carry. But despite not being directly buffed, Zari benefited from both her core items being buffed, so we're taking her down some amount to open up the meta. Otherwise, we're seeing a good range of early supportive and late oriented marksmen available, and just trying to open a few more situational picks with Jhin, Kais and Draven. I'm not really sure what they're saying, a good range of early supportive and late oriented marksmen. Like, aren't all the marksmen right now being just played crit? I don't get this. Support, finally just a lonely fresh buff to support meta. Overall we think it looks good with variety of things that are viable from many classes. I'm kinda afraid of MSI meta being swung heavily around Jinx Lulu and Aphelios Lulu, honestly. I'm really afraid of that. And if that happens, what you're gonna see is like champions like Zac and Sion are gonna be played a lot on top lane. Because then lane swap meta is gonna happen, and you know, you're gonna see tanks top lane dropping waves and being extremely low econ. So, I'm kind of afraid of that. This is why I wish they would maybe even nerf Lulu, but I don't know, whatever. And now to the changes that we haven't discussed. Yesterday. What is this going to mean for solo queue, and what is this going to mean for competitive? Akali will get 30 base HP. 30 base HP is a change that Riot does a lot. We've seen it on Gragas, we've seen it in the past on multiple champions, because I think it's just that it's like a number there. They have a lot of data on, so they know exactly what's going to happen and what isn't. Is 30 HP going to make Akali better for pro play? In fact, I think personally yes. I mean, it just makes Akali stronger at already the point of the game which she's strong at, which is like early game. 30 base HP is an early game buff. It also benefits Akali because she is a second win and Doran Shield user, and this directly benefits also by having a larger pool of HP. For solo queue, again, it's a small buff. Early game, she's strong already anyway. Already high stats, now even more. Yeah, Kali has really high base stats, really high HP, really high MR especially. This is why she's really good against mages. Yeah, I mean, not much to say, right? This is probably going to actually impact Pro in a way, I think, because there will be a Kali played in Pro, especially MSI. Javen 5 damage buff. It's a good buff because Javen uses Q all the time, so even though it looks like a small buff, it's actually a big buff. But on some, I guess he's happy. Galio, so this is probably solo Q. Galio is not going to see pro play. Base MS up by 5, this is good because he cares about MS a lot, especially with items like Leechbane. Q CD goes down by 1 second early. I don't think this really does anything. His problem is not that he can't spam QCD early, his problem is later on. It's really hard to stick to opponents and proc multiple passives. I personally think 5 MS is a nice buff, but he might need more. Grace. So it says increased effect.
LeBlanc base damage buff. Time for AD LeBlanc to be back into meta.
We're gonna see. Increased effect of AS from items and runes towards reload time by 35%. Crit damage ratio per pellet 45%. Okay, so first of all, I think these are amazing Grace changes. This is the right direction of Grace. The most unhealthy version of Grace, IMO, or the more unhealthier one, IMO, is either Bruiser Grace or Grace that goes full lethality and does most bursts with Q and ult. I think this is probably the best way to buff Grace because this incentivizes Grace to buy crit items like Infinity. Maybe even, something else. Very old school build of Grace used to be PD. Now that attack speed is no longer that trash on Grace, maybe you're gonna see like Phantom Desert Grace come back. Like, honestly, I could see it. It's hard to say how much these changes are going to do. It's very hard to comment on them because you need to cook up a Grace build that makes sense. Kraken Slayer probably does not make a lot of sense, right? Like Static Shoe probably does not make a lot of sense now that it's nerfed. If Static Shoe wasn't nerfed, maybe you'd be thinking about this. So what Graves crit item? Maybe the build's gonna be like Collector PD, Infinity. Like maybe this is a build that cooks up. Wait. Passive AP ratio up by 5%. QQ AP ratio up by 5%. So I'm happy and I'm unhappy. So first of all, I'm really happy because they're going for passive AP ratios, which are late game buffs, which is exactly how I want Faye to be buffed. I'm really happy with passive buff because I think it is underwhelming, but I'm not too happy about QQ buff. I don't really see this spell as being underwhelming. If you play into Hui, you're gonna realize that QQ at level 9, when he gets 5 points, is like so fucking strong and it's really hard to deal with. This ability does so much damage. I don't really know why this ability was getting buffed. I would much rather want W to be better late game by having less mana cost, or maybe the mana refund or the damage on the WE going up in late. That's what I would like, but whatever. It's very small Hui buff. If pro players are smart, they should be playing Hui. This champion, I think, is S tier in competitive. But it just takes skill to play Hui. It takes the team to be really good at playing around Hui. When I watch pro play Hui players, they play really wrong. Hui in competitive should mainly be played around zone control. He should be like an Anivia, not anything else. So you should mostly be spamming QE and EWs as Hui, especially later in the game, and they don't do that. So Hui players in competitive are not very good. Jarvan, if pro players are smart, this champion should be back in meta and pro. I don't know if they're smart enough. 1% up. I think this is a revert. I'm pretty sure this is like a revert, right? He used to have 7 or 8% before when they nerfed him, and now it's like kind of reverted. I think Jarvan's really good. When meta becomes a lot about immobile mids like Hui, and maybe ADCs like Jinx, and Thresh is not picked, Jarvan should be played. And then we have Jhin. Passive bonus MS on crit, 4% up. Q80 ratio up by some 4 numbers here. Okay, so it's like early game buffs, I guess, and late game buffs. Q base damage also down by 1 to have 4. Yeah, I mean, okay, so I guess he moves faster, he does more damage, decent gym buffs, nothing to say. Kai'Sa Q80 ratio up by 5%. Most Kai'Sa builds do get Q evolve, right? Like every version of Kai'Sa build does have Q evolve, whether you go like crit Kai'Sa, whether you go Lethality Kai'Sa, or if you go AP Kai'Sa, you still buy Manamon. So this is pretty much buffed to like every version of Kai'Sa, not bad. I think this is like a fine buff. LeBlanc. So this one I don't understand. I honestly don't understand. So I don't know why we're buffing the base damage of Q on LeBlanc. I don't. Like, if anything, we should only not buff Q. If any spell. I know it's only 5 damage, but you have to understand this ability is, like, it can proc twice, right? Because of the... It's basically 10 damage because of the mark. and then you can also use ult, so it could be more than that technically. I don't know why we're buffing Q. It's like literally the most brain dead ability of LeBlanc. Point and click. Why not buff W damage? Genuinely. Why not buff E damage? Because at least E and W you can dodge. Q you can't. Then the W CD going down by 3 seconds. Yeah, I mean, it's an early game buff. It's not that big of a buff. It's like mostly just first 5 levels buff, because then you get to level 7 and to 9 and your W is already like kind of not buffed anymore at that point. But yeah, basically, it does matter first 3 levels, because a lot of times you can kind of tank 1 W with LeBlanc, and because your cooldown is so high, you can kind of push in the wave and get the reset. 3 seconds in early game actually is a lot. So this could swing a lot of matchups when you're trying to just like, maybe you're playing like Tristana LeBlanc, you're low as Tristana, but you're trying to push in the wave before LeBlanc gets W up, and now LeBlanc gets W up and she fucks you over, you know? All of Q monster damage, I predicted this. I said the Q monster damage is gonna go up more. It's exactly what they're doing. This was very predictable change. Yeah, clear speed increase. Is Olaf gonna see playing competitive? I don't think so. I don't think it should. Like, I think champions like Jarvan, champions like Vi are just infinitely more valuable than Olaf ever will be. Rice, really happy with this buff. So W cooldown going down by 2 seconds. So because W is the last max spell, this actually works pretty much for the first 13 levels of the game, which is insane. But even bigger buff is the slower going from 35 to 50%. So what this does is it incentivizes Ryze to do more damage combos, okay? So a lot of combos on Ryze you have to do EW, which is basically the root, but now you can do the slow instead, which makes you do more damage. On top of that, what happens is that when champions have dashes or a certain amount of move speed, what can happen is you would W someone and do EQ, and the Q would actually miss because champions would be able to either sidestep it or dodge it. Now that the slow is actually more... like, the slow is way stronger, this is not going to happen anymore. So this is going to actually make Ryze a little bit less clunkier. Obviously, he still has other clunky things, like his spells being cancelled by champions going in Fog of War and stuff like that. His animation cast being very long for a champion because he's outdated. But this is definitely a step into the right direction. This champion has gotten buffed so many times. I honestly think Ryze is in the best state he's been in a long time. But that doesn't mean he's in a good state. Salas, monster damage going up by 100%. This was also same as Olaf, very predictable. They went very light on this monster mod damages, and now they're going up again. Salas jungle will not see light of playing competitive. This champion is still trash in jungle, do not play him. Trash, armor plus 2, armor growth plus 0.25. So a flat armor 2, slightly lane buff. Armor growth late game. This is actually a pretty decent armor growth buff, because actually Trash does struggle late game getting kind of blown up by mages, honestly. Not bad. Is Trash gonna see competitive play? Probably not, because pro players are probably just going to rather lock in Nautilus or whatever else they're gonna lock in. Rel maybe even. Champion nerfs. So Azir HP region down. This so Azir HP region used to be 8, I think, or 9, I believe. Now it's going to be 3.5. Yeah, it's a sustained nerf. It loses maybe, I mean, I don't know what the math is, but eventually he loses like a potion in lane. This does actually matter. I don't hate this nerf. I don't hate this nerf. But I really also like this. W base damage going down. This is what I suggested. I said that W's base damage per point is too strong on Azir. And it should be... He should spike more with AP, not with levels. So right now when Azir gets to like level 7 and 9, all of a sudden his damage goes up so hard on W that a lot of matchups he just starts going from even or losing to winning all of a sudden. This is going to flatten out the curve a little bit. It's a pretty decent change. Briar, HP growth -5, which means that at level 18 she gets like, what, 60 less HP or whatever the number is. Q cast range up by 25, W attack speed again lowered with flat amount. Again, the ability she maxes first. Again, W already got nerfed last time. Yeah, Briar is losing probably 1 to 2% win rate of this. This is pretty crazy. This champion has gotten nerfed like 10 times by now, I swear. She's definitely a balancing nightmare for Riot. Too good in low elo. Zac, HP region from 8 to 5. Also early game sustained nerf for Zac. This is especially impactful in matchups where he's losing a lot, because then he can't use the passive to regen a lot of HP and he has to just work on base HP, right? I personally don't think this is going to do anything to Zac. This is... yeah, I don't think this is enough. Like, for example, I think Azir loses a lot more with an HP region nerf than Zac does as a champion. Zari 30 HP nerf. Yeah, just weaker early. Early game nerf for Zari. Easier to lane bully her. Then we have Mordekaiser changes. Q cooldown from 9 to 4 to 8 to 4, so slightly better in lane. E damage down by 10 at every rank. Okay, whatever. R can no longer be cleansed, still blocked by CC immunity. So this should be still above the Mort. I think people are overreacting to how much this does to Mort. In a lot of cases, people are not buying QSS into Mordekaiser, but obviously Mordekaiser is a low elo skew champion, so this could impact low elo a little bit. I don't think Mordekaiser should be... I don't think Mordekaiser will be played in Pro. Even after this, I don't expect it to happen. So just so you guys know, I'm going to pull up patch preview here. So in the patch preview, Freak talks about that, look at this. Alistar, Gangplank, Milio, Olaf, and Rengar will no longer be able to escape Mordekaiser R. Okay? So if you're Mordekaiser R, and you press any of these champions' ultimates or whatever, or Rengar W, or Gangplank W, they apparently can't. That's what I watched Freak said in the video. I don't know why. I find it really weird that you can't Alistar ult. One said they can. They're gonna change that on PBE probably. I mean, this is like, maybe they change it, maybe they don't. Maybe it still works on PBE. But Freak said in the patch preview that these champions will no longer be able to escape Mordekaiser R. I find it really weird. So, Alistar should be able to, in my opinion. Gangplank should be able to. Milio shouldn't. Olaf, I'm not sure, probably shouldn't. Like, Olaf historically was picked into Mordekaiser, especially because of this interaction. And Rengar probably also should. The only champion that I can kinda accept here is Milio. Because I kinda find it weird that Milio should be able to get out of Mord ult with ult. But because ult of Milio should be a cleanse, not a QSS. But the rest make a lot of sense to me. So this is kinda weird, but yeah. Oops, I closed the wrong tab. People are overreacting on this boss and more, they're way too hard. Then we have Skarner. Mana growth down, mana growth, region growth up, which is basically a jungle buff more than a top lane nerf. Q1 cast time down, so less clunky. Q damage goes... Q damage goes up a lot, especially with bonus AD. Q mana goes down. Q1 buff duration goes up. Q2 recast lockout goes down. W mana up, W damage down. Okay. I would say these are Skarner buffs, I mean, especially in jungle. But I also think top lane Skarner doesn't look too bad here either. System buffs, Baron attacks, damage increase to many Baron attacks. Okay, this is fine. Void grab, scamp. Spawn time 6 minutes. So now people will probably be around Jake more at minute 5 than before. Which means that maybe some teams can do Jake and then do grabs at the same time. So objectives aren't being traded. True DPS per stack goes up by 2. Not bad. Still 4 seconds duration, half range. Spawn threshold 5 stacks to 4 stacks. Still gain a second summon at 6 stacks. Okay. I think the void grabs are actually okay as well. Overall, I think the patch is a bit smaller than I thought. Because champion buffs in a lot of cases will not matter. So for example, this Salas buff is irrelevant, right? This Ola buff is probably irrelevant. The Rise buff for competitive play at MSI will be irrelevant. The Thrash buff is probably irrelevant. The LeBlanc buff, I would assume, is going to be irrelevant. Right? The Jhin buff will probably be irrelevant as well. The Grace buff might be irrelevant. The Galio buff will be irrelevant. So a lot of these champions that are being buffed are actually just not going to impact MSI. The nerf list is fine, but I wish there were maybe a few more champions here. I will still call this patch probably a success because it's still more entertaining than the last 2 patches they did.